On Friday, Dubliner Graham Dale was killed on the front line in Ukraine. It's understood that the 45-year-old from Raheny had travelled to Ukraine shortly after the Russian invasion last year and went on to join the Ukrainian Army. Prior to that, Graham had served 7 years in the US Marine Corps in Iraq, and one man who knew him quite well and co-wrote a book with Graham about his time in Iraq is Neil Fetherstonhaugh, reporter with the Sunday World and co-author of The Green Marine, An Irishman's War in Iraq. Neil, good morning.
Good morning, Pat. How are you?
Now, he's a man with an extraordinary life story, really. When you heard the news that he was in Ukraine and had died, I'm sure it was saddening news, but it was the stuff, I suppose, of a life packed with adventure.
Yeah, you get those phone calls, Pat, don't you? Out of the blue. I didn't know, so I got a phone call. Reporter, I've often made those phone calls myself, and she had to apologize for breaking the news because I hadn't heard. So, having said that, and, I was saying this yesterday, that while it takes you back a little bit, I'm not entirely surprised, sadly, that this is how Graham's life ended, because he was just one of those people that put himself literally on the front lines for other people. Like you mentioned there, he had served with the US Marines in Iraq as an Irishman. He signed up immediately in the immediate aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. 3 days later, he signed up for the US Marines. And then, as it subsequently turns out, he's gone and volunteered to fight in Ukraine, where sadly he's lost his life.
Now, take me back in time to his youth when he was a teenager and at school. He always felt for the underdog, the guy who might be bullied.
Yeah, you see, so this is the mark of the man, Pat. The guy who went to fight in Iraq and who then went to fight in Ukraine. He told me that when he was in school in Raheny, growing up, he'd often get into trouble because he would be fighting. But what he was doing was he was defending other kids from the schoolyard bullies. That's what he was doing. He was standing up, like you say, for the underdog. And that was the character of the man. And that's what struck me when I met him. He was very forthright, and he was very clear in his intentions and what he wanted to do and what he needed to do in the world. I saw a tribute to him yesterday on Facebook from one of his friends in the US saying that he was not only a good friend and a good pal and a good heart, but he's a warrior, and she described him as the bigger brother. And that's exactly that was the man that I met all those years ago when we sat down.
And tell me, when you did meet him, I mean, did he come across as a tough guy, a hard guy?
There was an interview I read about him when he came out to do his book launch from another reporter who said there's no mistaking the US Marine sitting in the hotel lobby where she met him, because he had that look. He had that, that kind of high and tight, jarhead look that the US Marine Corps favors. Stocky, he was well built, but he wasn't, this is really important to get across, he wasn't some sort of Rambo figure who was flexing his muscles and being, as you mentioned there, he was quiet-spoken, very, a deep thinker. He thought very, very carefully about his actions. He examined his actions. He questioned his actions. And, he had a lot of, I suppose, mixed feelings and a little bit of guilt about his activities and his experiences in Iraq. So, he wasn't this, like I said, this Rambo figure. He was a very, very careful, intelligent, well man.
Now, he went to America in the year 2000, and I mean, there was another path open to him. He was a consultant for IBM, as software consultant, so there was probably quite a lucrative, attractive career open to him. But the mark of the man is that he was volunteering for the local fire department anyway, before 9/11 happened.
He was actually out with volunteering for, fire department in Texas when 9/11 happened. It was that morning. He was actually rescuing an old man who has some issue that they were trying to rush into the hospital when the 9/11 attacks happened. And as I said earlier, 3 days later, he was at the US Marine Corps recruiting centre. As he explained himself, the Marines recruiting officer was looking at him, going, "Are you lost? Are you sure what you're doing here?" And it wasn't that big a deal. He described it as those recruiting centres are like McDonald's, they're on every corner. So in the immediate aftermath of the attacks, and I mean, look, with the benefit of hindsight, we all know, what happened subsequently afterwards, years afterwards. But at that time, if you just take yourself back, we didn't know what was happening. America was under attack. For all we knew, the world was under attack. It was in that atmosphere, we have to remember, in context, is when he signed up to fight for America.
Now, he went to Iraq and he kept a diary which helped with the genesis of the book you wrote about him. Did the experience in Iraq impact upon him? I mean, did he suffer from it?
Yes. The short answer is yes. He suffered post-traumatic stress disorder. Quite clearly, he was very troubled by his experiences in Iraq. You're right, he did keep a diary during his deployments that he added to each and every day. And how I just go back a little bit, how I got in contact with him first was I was a reporter at the time for the Northside People. And Graham used to email me from Iraq saying, "How's it going, Northside People? What's the weather like? I really miss chipper chips. You really miss chips." And he was a real homegrown dub. And I was emailing back going, "What are you doing in Iraq?" And he told me, "I'm here with the Marine Corps." And I just found that absolutely fascinating. And so we stayed in contact. We actually ran a few stories about him in the Northside People of this Dubliner missing his chips and his family while fighting in the deserts of Western Iraq. So, very dangerous place.
Neil, no surprise to you then that when he saw the injustice that had been done to Ukraine, that he brought himself there?
Like I said yesterday, Pat, I didn't know. I got the phone call, so that's the first I heard of it. And then, after it sunk in a little bit, and I was reading tributes to him online last night, I'm not terribly surprised. If he had contacted me himself from Ukraine, we would have embarked on the same sort of story, because he was just, that's what he did. He went out there, and people can question his motivations, but in my mind, he was just, in his mind, standing up for the weaker guy, and would have seen, the Russians in this case as the schoolyard bully that he battled all those years ago in Raheny.
Well, he died tragically on Friday. He died a hero, I suspect. But Neil, thank you very much for joining us. Neil Fetherstonhaugh, reporter with the Sunday World, co-author of The Green Marine, An Irishman's War in Iraq, whose final war was that in Ukraine, and our condolences to all his friends and his family.